I just wanted to zoom in on the Arctic competition picture. You have Russia and China signed a joint venture in October 2025 for year-round North Sea route container shipping. Over 3 million tons of cargo transited in 2024. And I'm just curious how you guys are thinking about how we should be thinking about Greenland in that context. From a defense standpoint, this is a growing concern for the United States. Obviously, the polar ice caps are melting. There's more navigable areas there. Russia, Canada, China, other nations have significant interests in the North, and we're just watching that occur more and more. We have been very slow to react to this area of the world, partly because of the culture wars here over whether global warming is real or not. Also, not necessarily having the amount of money to invest in the kinds of shipping that you would need to operate in those areas. But we are growing more concerned because we're seeing much more transiting up there, and we are not as much in control of how that plays out. So I think that is one of the major drivers. Security is a major driver behind this. We can't totally dismiss that. I just happen to think that Trump really just wants to be adding territory to the United States. I think he's fairly obsessed with President McKinley and would like to see some of these places. But those shipping lanes are becoming much more active, and we would like to probably have a part of that and be concerned that, frankly, China and Russia would have greater control in those parts of the world, and we would have a lot less to say about it. Having Greenland would play into that. Brian, China's I may be saying this wrong, Shenghe Resources is the second largest shareholder in the Kvanefjeld project. Beijing has called it itself a near Arctic state. What's the actual Chinese footprint in Greenland today?
Well, take it back for a sec. That company was the company that had led a consortium to get MP Materials out of bankruptcy back in 2017, 2018, and was the reason that the government had that on their radar so early in the administration to kind of, to wrestle it, so to speak, from those hands. But like we said, the processing still goes back there. Yeah, they're a major company. They represent big conglomerates of investment. I would consider any interest they have pretty seriously and well supported.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is a completely different part of the world, but in this hemisphere, the concerns about China's control over the canal, Panama Canal down there, we didn't like China having that level of interest in that place. We also don't like what they're doing or what they were doing in Venezuela. They have 3 satellite monitoring stations there, and they've made inroads. So we're just simply concerned about China getting footholds in our hemisphere. Matt, Denmark.
Well, they have footholds in a lot of companies too, Frank. I mean, they've almost worked through their times of heavy government support in the Belt and Road projects and things like that. Not that they still don't get heavy government support, but financial support. They've worked through that, and kind of the fittest of the crew have survived all of that and put themselves on the boards of a lot of global mining companies and in the offtake agreements of almost everything. So they've put a long-term effort in this. They're very involved every place.
Yeah, we seem to have been asleep at the wheel in a number of places. Matt, Denmark just committed 88 billion kroner, or about $13.7 billion, to Arctic defense, including F-35 acquisitions. They've deployed 200 additional troops. Is Europe actually stepping up here, or is this mostly theater? I mean, what does this mean for European defense names? And I guess you could even speak somewhat to some U.S. defense names as a byproduct of this.
Yeah, I mean, the European countries have committed to increase the spending as a percentage of GDP, and I think I do think that Denmark's commitment in particular is serious. Like, it's not just theater. I think that they've committed the 14 billion through 2033, 16 additional F-35 fighter jets, bringing the total fleet to 43, and so they also have committed to having 2 additional Navy ships. So. And then you're talking also infrastructure. They're looking at a new Arctic Command headquarters in Nuuk, Greenland. And so that naval facility sort of would be a significant increase in presence there. And so really, if we're looking at, the real capability enhancement of them, committing to over 3% of GDP on defense spending, which companies stand to benefit the most in Europe? I think the ones that stand out the most are Rheinmetall, Land Systems, Ammunition, Air Defense, BAE Systems as well, with a naval and F-35 partner. You also have Leonardo with helicopters, electronics, and naval systems, and also SAAB with their fighters and submarines and air defense are kind of the European names that kind of are top of mind on who the beneficiaries are. I would say that this sort of increase in sort of geopolitical tension, it really just and then you have the backdrop also of Trump trying to push for a $1.5 trillion budget in FY27. There are a number of beneficiaries of U.S. defense firms as well. And because, really, we have sort of this really a I would say there's going to be a higher priority or a higher percentage of the budget that's going to go to sort of that Arctic spending, if you will. The U.S., as you mentioned, has had a base there since the late 1940s, early 1950s. We've had a presence in Greenland. And really what we're looking at here is early warning radars and sensor modernization. And so the winners there, I think, are going to be companies like RTX, L3 Harris, Northrop Grumman, really with the radar sensor sort of ecosystems broadly. But then also on missile defense and sort of integrated air missile defense, RTX and Lockheed Martin are kind of top of mind as well.
Do you see that? What's the window? And I have the thesis idea that there's a window here, right, in which the U.S. is still very relevant for Europe. But at some point, European investments will begin to tip the scales, and they'll want to spend more and more on their own defense. I think the UK, for example, is taking a certain amount of money or making commitments to Ukraine, but the U.S. has a slice of it. But at some point, they would hope that tips more toward their own industries and where they buy them from. But it's going to take several years for that to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Europe becomes more serious about, like, if NATO nations are upset with whatever happens with Greenland, and that's a very real possibility, I do think that European defense companies are going to be prioritized over U.S. if possible. I think there's a number of areas where U.S. defense firms, are leaders, and I feel like that window that you mentioned, I would say it's probably a decade plus of really just reliance on sort of the major defense firms in the U.S. that have already been sort of supplying NATO and other allies with arms and aircraft and ships as well.